Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happenstance into this Truth Bomb riff. My name is Patrick Lovell, the producer with the $71 trillion truth, and I am recording this on Saturday, April 26th, 2025, at approximately 10 a.m. my time. And, I felt compelled to try to send as brief of a message as I can. Those of you who have been followers on my YouTube page know that sometimes I kind of get in the process, which is basically part lecture, part sermon, part self-help therapy that I've been doing over the course of 3 years now, about 3 years. And I think this is my 597th offering. And pretty much they've all said the same thing. And the whole purpose is to respond to what's happening in real time and try to deconstruct a pathway to this truth that I just proclamated, that I've got information that nobody else on your feed, nobody else in media, nobody else in the world is going to tell you. And it's pretty simple. So I'll just say this first. And if this is enough for you, because everybody wants a shortcut to the point, I will just present it now. And then you can take off or you can listen further to get some further context on what this means. First and foremost, we're in a situation that I think most people realize is a lawless president where the Trump administration, let's call it Elon Trump, is waging war on the law. Think about that. Waging war on the law. What does that mean? Well, if you wage war on the law as behalf of the so-called chief executive administrator of the executive branch, i.e. the presidency, then you're waging war on the United States, on what makes the United States what it is. And I'd like to think that most people knows what I'm inferring by that, but unfortunately, most of our population is incomprehensibly stupid and pathetic, and they don't have a freaking clue of how things work or why they work the way they do, or what the purpose of the construct of our country is, all things considered. But the point, we floated billionaires and billionaire apparatuses illegally over the course of 14 years by providing them trillions of dollars to be above the law and market forces. And they've restructured the United States to bend the knee to serve the control of the hierarchy of those that have garnished the most control. It's kind of like a P. Diddy freak off of everything that matters to this country. Now, I'm reacting at the moment to a lot of things that are happening. I mean, really, just in the general consensus. I mean, things that are on my radar are everything from the NFL draft to NHL playoffs to NBA playoffs, baseball, and a whole assortment of personal items. Okay, so that's the four walls of my existence. Everybody else has their come from, right? But I'm also very in tune with how things work and what's going on, particularly in the political sector, as I'm obviously entrenched for a lot of reasons. And yesterday's pretty shocking scenario that a judge, Miss Dugan out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, was arrested. And the sum total of the Trump administration's propaganda, in lieu of all of the things that were happening with uh, Kilmar Abrego Garcia and the notion that can be disappeared into death prisons in other countries without due process or habeas corpus goes to the heart of this coup. But a coup that's lasted what, 10 years for those who attribute all of this stuff to Trump, but for those that aren't stupid and in the know, understand that the likes of the Koch Foundation, Libertarian Heritage Foundation have been at work for decades. And they're smart technocrats funded by billionaires and a whole apparatchik, which is kind of the panoply of influence from think tanks to revolving door to lobbyists to legislation to many things that the power uses to garnish control for their purposes. And it happens if you happen to have a lot of money. Most people in the United States don't have a lot of money, so they don't think about these things. They think about survival. They think about how they're going to be able to survive and provide for their families or not, depending on their circumstances, which are obviously infinite. But the stupidity is the problem. 76 million Americans voted for Donald Trump. Now, I don't know if that number is accurate. I believe there was a lot of cheating involved in the last election. We know that there was a lot of suppression of minority votes in swing states. And I would cite Greg Palast's work that I think is pretty amazing. And maybe I'll put a link to that in the description below, just so you have context if you're interested. But I think there was a lot more than that. I think there was a lot more than that, considering who Elon Musk is, what Starlink is, and many other things, and a lot of peculiarities in the remaining months of the election and so on and so forth. But I don't want to relitigate all of that stuff. If you want to kind of find out my context, I encourage you to dig into one of my 597 truth bombs, or 596, right? But I want to get to the point to further elevate and try to connect with smart people who aren't complete idiot morons, that are willing to let our country fall into the hands of the most egregiously corrupt, moronic, stupid, criminal joke of a human being that has become our president because of this apparatus of billionaires. And it's not just contained to billionaires in the United States. It's a global scenario. A lot of people call it the global rise of authoritarianism. Autocrats from Viktor Orban and, of course, Vladimir Putin and everything he's been involved with for really going back to the 90s and really his entire career. But in terms of being the premier of the, well, then Soviet Union and now Russia. But a couple of things to qualify and to put into context, just from the perspective of the so-called mandate of the last election. It wasn't a mandate. Donald Trump won 77 million votes, supposedly. Kamala Harris, approximately 75 million. And that was down slightly. I think the sum total of it was the second largest participation by Americans in our history in an election that I believe 156 million people voted in the 2024 election. And I think by contrast, in 2020, Biden won 81 million votes, but I think the sum total was approximately 158 million. But there's some sort of discrepancies in the numbers because I have seen a lot of numbers floated around that 13 million people less voted in 2024 that did in 2020, and that was the difference. Regardless, as was reiterated to me yesterday in a conversation I had on my Friday panel discussion with what I call the untouchables, which are the greatest legal minds in our country and the people who have had decades fighting corruption, who we need to listen to, that nobody else is offering, and you can find only here on Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con. And I would encourage you to share and watch religiously to try to tune out the noise in every single direction. But the point of the numbers is it wasn't a mandate, first and foremost. But right away, and from the very beginning, there was a fusion of all things Project 2025, the Unitarian Presidency, written by technocrats who understand the ins and outs of the mechanics of government, that with the assistance of Elon Musk, the world's richest man, who put $277 million into Trump's campaign. By contrast, I don't know what the sum total of the Republican war chest was. We know the Democrats had 1.5 billion. And obviously, Elon Musk and the purchase of X was a big influencer in that scenario, not to mention all of the insanity that was happening across the board in the I should say, waning months of the 2024 election. But the bottom line is that not only, and I remember feeling this way on election eve, watching the results come in, I was like, they got not just the presidency, not just, a pretty much a significant increase in the electoral college, and they got Congress completely. And they had already had SCOTUS. So I was like, okay, here we go. We had Trump say, I'm going to be a dictator on day one. We had Trump say that he was going to have a mammoth campaign of retribution. And we had Project 2025 that spelled out exactly what we're in the midst of. But of course, it did take a lot of us by surprise, even though it was all out there. And I myself, admittedly, was surprised at the level of speed that Steve Bannon's strategy of flood the zone vis-a-vis Doge to hijack the Treasury, and then they got the FBI and the DOJ immediately. Now that's part and parcel of a new administration, but to get these idiots in our cabinet, confirmed, could only happen if you had the numbers in Congress, which of course they got the trifecta, meaning the Republican Party, which isn't a party, it's a bastion of liars, filthy pimps, whores, junkies, and parasites that serve this insane, moronic, buffoon criminal that's now ushered in fascism. How do we know? Well, because they're arresting judges, among other things. Now, if you understand who I am, you understand that I've got a pretty big beef with the judiciary, and I'll get to that in a moment. And I don't want to carry on too much because I want to once again try to keep this as short and compartmentalized as possible. But first, my message to those of you who watch me a lot, please just share the information that I'm providing. First and foremost, the only way this audience is going to build is because you share. And when you share, you believe in the content that I'm providing. I know there's a lot of you out there that respond and want to tell me that that was really useful information, or you're on this spot, or you're again, you could improve in other places, and so on and so forth. But nobody is revealing the information that I am. So if you're new to this, first and foremost, you can find me on YouTube at Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con. There's a lot of incredibly important information. Further, I have a series called The Con that you can find at thecon.tv. It's free. We made it free because all the American people buy our lies. And I know some of you cringe at that comment, but it's true. Combination of stupidity and people that are just really boneheaded, but I guess that's the same thing. But it's free. I'm sorry, it's free. It's the blueprint and the revelation of how the largest criminal financial conspiracy and cover up in the history of the world uh, didn't get taken down. It never ended. It's the story. But unfortunately, it's only half of what I have and why I had to create these truth bomb riffs to further the message and the information I have. Immediately after we released the con, right about the time period that the insurrection was underway. It was actually about a month before, but we got swept up in the aftermath of that. But we were quashed. And there's a lot of things to that that I've talked about again in my truth bombs. But that information really never penetrated the ecosphere because of all the madness of lies in every direction. But further to that point, the situation left me where literally my life collapsed. I was in a situation where things didn't go the way they were supposed to. And as a result, my marriage of 22 years went upside down. The family that meant the world to me, that still means the world to me, that means more than anything else in the world to me, um, went sideways. And I was in a real, a really bad situation. And the only way I could find center and peace was to deliver the information I have directly to the people. And that's why I created this YouTube channel. But as we went through the process and things started to emerge, and there was kind of an intermediary step, which incredibly important information, I created a podcast called The New Untouchables that revealed a lot of the information that I have on the shelf. It's 20 hours of information. It's available on YouTube. I also packed it into the website that I'm about to tee up, but it all reveals the truth of the largest criminal apparatus in the history of the world. that overran the United States 14 years ago, and it never ended. And it got so out of control and so bad that, of course, it created what we're in the midst of. What do you do when you take the cops off the beat? What happens if a cop is corrupted? The criminals take over. And so, how is it possible that a nation where the laws are supreme has a president that's waging war on the law and arresting judges? Everything I just said. It's not racketeering, excuse me. It's not rocket science, it's racketeering. Corruption births and fuels fascism. And yeah, I have the $71 trillion truth that reveals it all, which you can see for the first time. And it's not the first time, I've had it out there for a long time, but it's the only place that it exists. I aggregated all of this information. I put it on with a plan because if you've got the revelation of the problem, then what is the solution? Well, that's what I lay out in the Clean New Deal, which you can find at thecleannewdeal.org. And it lays out all of these revelations with evidence inside it. It's unbelievable. I don't care if you're a fan of Rachel Maddow, Lawrence O'Donnell, Lawrence Tribe, Andrew Weissman, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, AOC, so on and so forth, on down the line. They don't have answers to the corruption. Neither does the 50501 movement yet. Yesterday, it was revealed that Act Blue, the big fundraising mechanism for the Democratic Party, i.e., the DNC, is also deeply immersed in the 50501 movement, i.e., through Indivisible. They're organized, they're structured, but they weren't organic like the Occupy Wall Street movement, although there were elements of organic, but it's a national cry to respond appropriately to this unbelievable, corrupt, fascist hijacking of the greatest democracy in the history of the world. But they don't have the answers. The closest that you can get really is Bernie Sanders and AOC by way of them saying that you've got to tax the rich and you've got to end Citizens United. Okay, yeah, that's nowhere close to what I present in the Clean New Deal based on the information that I have. I mean, look, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe in the 90s, right? Well, 2025, yeah, roughly 25 years ago. A comedian on The Tonight Show, a guy by the name of Jay Leno, who was kind of a household name at the time, used to do this man on the street stuff where he'd go put a camera on people and ask them questions about what was happening in government. And he would showcase all of these idiots that had no idea who the Speaker of the House was, who their senators were, what the issues were, and so on and so forth. And I used to just feel nauseous watching how completely out of touch so many Americans were with their the political process. Because it's necessary for everyone to be plugged in to information, to be a citizen that can hold power to account. That's the way it's been designed in the midst of everything else that the founding fathers designed our country to be able to function for and of by for the people, as opposed to what I discovered, we function of by and for the corruption. And we're like in the darkest time in the history of the United States during our lifetimes. And my lifetime spans 56 years. It was pretty dark at the end of the 60s. In fact, everything now is pretty much a continuation of that. And obviously the Trail of Tears and slavery and many other things that were absolutely vicious in American history have been absolutely horrendous and horrible. And that's why we had, in order to form a more perfect union, and we had a civil war, and we had a war against fascism, and we had the civil rights movements, and we had progressive movements, and all of those things that gave us this incredible world that we inherited that we're now losing. Nobody has an answer. I've got the answers. I'm not more important than you. I just went the distance on behalf of liberty and justice for all. And the biggest question that confounds everyone ultimately is, how are we going to pay for it? How do we have a nation that can do all of these things that we want to do, but we don't know who's in control and what they're doing And why? Well, we certainly do now. Donald Trump is just basically creating a tariff war to line his own pockets, first and foremost. It's not to create manufacturing and make America great again by any means, because you wouldn't do it this way if it were. But beyond that, a country like Russia, with an autocratic leader like Vladimir Putin, who I think is playing the long game of retribution, quite frankly, against the United States for a financial crash in 1998 that destroyed the ruble through the first major quant hedge fund called long-term capital management that bankrupted the ruble, that broke up the Soviet Union. Yeah, Putin knows exactly how this game is played. But the Russian economy is tiny in comparison to the United States. And yet they have an asset in our president that they have control over, that Putin has control over. There is no question about it. If you think I'm speaking in tongues and hyperbole and I don't know what I'm talking about, look at my YouTube page 2 videos ago, a guy by the name of David K. Johnston, who is the premier expert, journalistic expert on all things Donald Trump, who laid out information I don't think has been seen anywhere else, quite frankly. It just makes it absolutely clear who Donald Trump is, even though a lot of people know who he is, but more don't. So just to wrap it up, look, when you understand what I'm delivering to you, and you're able to put all the pieces together and the sides of the Rubik's Cube together, and you understand what the problem is, can you then only understand the solution that I've laid out in the Clean New Deal? I believe in liberty and justice for all. I'm an entrepreneur. Ideologically, I'm more akin to a democratic socialist in the FDR sort of uh, historical bent. But I know that we have to have a safety net, but at the same time, I know that we have to have the free market. But I also understand the construct of the law. The law is the only way that a system of dynamism, a system of see a need, fill a need, opportunities, innovation, progression, on all of those types of things, of which creates my mind and my being and everything that I've experienced throughout my 56 years on this earth, thanks to the United States, that makes me anti fascist. I believe in freedom. I believe in liberty and justice for all. And I believe in the light of truth. I literally saw during one of the 3 protests of the 50501 rallies that I've attended, plus Bernie and AOC, that I've been in the trenches because I support it. But at the same time, I'm also looking at it from the bent that I've been in the trenches for the last 14 years. My colleague and I did a documentary film where we attended 33 Occupy Wall Street encampments, coast to coast, in 2011 when the Occupy Wall Street movement happened. And we know what created that movement and what happened to it. And we know what's going on now. And we know, because we've been in the trenches the whole time, filling in the blanks and aggregating all of the information, that no one in media would or could, to be able to be in this position where, and I used this analogy the other day, one of my favorite films of all time is Indiana Jones. It is my favorite film of all time. Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Indy said to Sala in that film during a pivotal moment, what gave Indy the advantage over the Nazis to find the Lost Ark, when he said, they're digging in the wrong place. That's what's been going on this whole time. But it's not because they don't know the answer. And who's they? If you look at Rachel Maddow, she's the communications director of the Wall Street Meritocracy. She's very good in many ways. She's very capable. She's very intelligent. She has incredible resources. She tells us the truth about Donald Trump in every direction. She does not tell you the truth about the billionaire class that created the opportunity that enabled Trump and MAGA. That's what the Democratic Party doesn't want you to understand. That we floated billionaires, trillions of dollars illegally behind the scenes that they supervised. It's the biggest grift in history. Does that mean the Democratic Party is less than the Republicans? No, the Republicans are ridiculous. insane, disgusting. I don't even want to go down the litany of adjectives that come to my mind when I think about the weakest cowards that would betray the United States for this incredible aristocratic takeover of the United States. But that's what they are. They're Confederates. They basically want to take us back to the plantation paradigm. That's what they're all about. Theft for the people who pay them. And they're yes men. They're complicit cowards. They're weasels. What's the difference between them and the Democrats? The Democrats are smarter. They do believe in most of the principles of liberty and justice for all and the integrity of law, but they're also malleable. AOC said, don't hold us to a purity test. Nothing will ever be perfect, but we can do better. She's right. And mankind can never be perfect. We're always going to be flawed. But it's ridiculous when you understand the information that I have. If you believe that, or I should say, if you're shocked by the fact that Trump can be a lawless president waging war on the law in the country where the law is supposed to be supreme based on separation in the Constitution, then you can't see the forest for the trees. And oh, yeah, the judiciary that he's arresting now, there are parcels of the judiciary that were handpicked to basically work on behalf of the system of this financial collapse where they destroyed the middle class and basically did a smash and grab of real estate in the 2008-2009 crisis, where millions of people were crushed in the courts illegally, that the courts were playing ball with the power, that got tens of trillions of dollars for free from the full faith and credit in the United States, from the Federal Reserve, not Congress, who has the power of the purse. That's the whole trick. And they floated themselves and they created this disaster that never ends. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. If your issue is the climate, this is your remedy. If your issue is systemic racism or transphobia or whatever else, or, lawless, what do we call it, military excursions, that, adventurism over the course of the last 20 years, this is at the core of it. It's always about the money. And it's always about corruption. The corruption now is worse than at any time in our nation's history. Well, that we've been alive. They definitely put the shackles on it during Watergate and things that took place, but not all the way. Just like after the Civil War, we didn't destroy Jim Crow. There's always this sort of appeasement. There's always sort of this compromise that enables the powers of the dark side to continue to exist. And we're at a state in 2025. I can't believe it's 2025. And we're dealing with issues that are taking us back 50 to 100 years, but enabled by the most villainous, deceitful, hateful, vengeful, ridiculous stupidity in the history of the world. It's like, and I've used these analogies before, if you were sitting, waiting to get on board a 747 to go on a trip to wherever, and you just happen to see in the bar all of the pilots getting drunk as shit and falling on the floor and having, I don't know, strippers dance on them and everything else, and then you saw them go get in the cockpit, would you want to get on that plane? No, it's pretty much what we're in the midst of. The cabinet that Trump has assigned are unbelievably beyond comprehension, inept and incompetent. They don't have any licenses to fly the USS 747, but here we are. And if you know anything about systems, and if you know anything about integrity, you know that a plane can't fly without the integrity of the system. A ship can't float. A building can't stand. Street lights can't work. An entire mosaic of, modern society doesn't function if you have systems work properly. But the system is working exactly the way it's designed to. If you want to have a perverted, inverted scenario where billionaires have complete control, and we've just basically gone back to a slavery mentality, among other things. I encourage you, I implore you to watch the information that I have, to read the information I have. And if you want to challenge me, I encourage that as well. But don't do it until you fully understand the information that I've set forth. You have to have context to have to understand what is going on to understand how we can fix and remedy the problem. It's really quite easy. If only tens of millions of us could understand what's going on to get on the same page. And at the moment, that's not happening because corruption still rules with impunity. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. When a group of men discover plunder, they create a legal code to authorize it and a moral code to glorify it. My friends, truth is light. When you live in light, you live in truth. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. When you live a lie, you're depraved. When you live a lie, inside you die. Stop lying. Stop buying lies. Guys, we're at the precipice. I think we just passed the Rubicon. If you, me, and everybody you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in integrity, sustainability, beauty, decency, liberty, and justice for all, if we merge in unity behind the Clean New Deal, which is our destiny, we'll purge the misery of tyranny and create the renaissance of possibility. Thank you. Onwards and upwards.